Hello, today I'm going to be doing a comparison between Final Cut Pro 10 and Davinci Resolve. Both of these programs are very well-known nonlinear editors, or NLEs, and when you're looking for an editor to use, the chances are you have considered both of these. Final Cut Pro is actually a bit more well-known than Blackmagic, especially in the more YouTubing and single operator, editor, the kind of person who does it all. So we're going to go through 10 different categories, and whichever editor wins the category, that editor will get a point. This is a terrible way to make decisions about your editing program, but hopefully it's a little bit of fun, and the information you'll get from the comparison will help you decide which NLE to go for. First of all, editing. As you can imagine, for a video editor, editing is a very important task. When I say editing, I'm talking about the timeline, taking clips from a browser or from a bin, moving it into the timeline, cutting them down, rearranging them, that kind of thing. Well, it's going to depend a bit on your preferences. Personally, I prefer Final Cut Pro and the magnetic timeline. To me, it just makes sense the way you have clips stick to other clips and footage moves around in chunks, but I do see how if you have been using the more traditional track-based system, Final Cut Pro would be quite challenging for you. I started off with iMovie and then upgraded to Final Cut Pro 10, so for me it was a very seamless transition, and for that reason I am going to give a point to Final Cut Pro. Then we have color, and obviously Final Cut Pro wins this category. Actually no, it doesn't. Davinci Resolve is used to color grade pretty much every feature film you see in Hollywood and short film festivals. Davinci Resolve is like the last name in color correction and color grading. Final Cut Pro has some alright color tools, it's good enough, it's got some color wheels, some hue saturation things, some curves, but really it's no comparison to Davinci Resolve and the color nodes. Davinci Resolve more powerful, there are more color grading tutorials, it's easier to learn, and it's widely used in the industry for color grading, so definitely Davinci Resolve gets the point here. Audio is a bit more of a closer category. Both of these programs have good audio tools. Final Cut Pro has a range of filters, but I think I'm going to give this one to Davinci Resolve because it has Fairlight, which is a audio post-production tool, and that is built into Davinci, which is quite impressive. The number of different programs Davinci combines into one giant program. There's compression, there's EQ, denoisers, de-essers, all sorts of tools are available, and if you want to build a post-production desk setup, you can get these Fairlight mixing desks and Fairlight control panels, which will make audio mixing a lot easier and a lot quicker. Either way, that's another point for Davinci Resolve. Next we have speed, and I've been very impressed with Blackmagic's progress with Resolve. They have optimized it and they've made the render times significantly faster, and at least on a MacBook Pro, I have seen Davinci Resolve in some benchmarks render faster than Final Cut Pro, which is very impressive considering how much optimization has gone into Final Cut Pro. But even with that, in a lot of the cases, Final Cut Pro does still render faster, and it has background rendering, and I think it transcodes footage a little bit quicker, and even if it doesn't, it transcodes all your files in the background so you can keep working with the original source footage. So for that reason, also combined with the editing, and I do find the magnetic timeline to be a faster, more efficient way, the speed category is going to Final Cut Pro. Ease of use. Davinci Resolve is actually not as hard to use as you might think for a professional post-production program. The interface is a little bit overwhelming when you first open it up, but it doesn't take long to get the hang of everything. But that being said, I do have to say Final Cut Pro does win the ease of use. There's a much lower learning curve, and if you've started off with iMovie and you've upgraded to Final Cut Pro, it's quite a seamless transition as both programs function in fundamentally the same way. If you're a YouTuber looking to up your editing game, or you're a one-person production company looking to film, edit everything yourself, then I think Final Cut Pro is definitely worth considering, so that's another point to Final Cut Pro. But now Davinci Resolve is able to start winning some points back with this next category of cross-platform. Final Cut Pro runs on OS X, and that's it. Davinci Resolve runs on OS X, Windows, and Linux, and that's pretty impressive because not a lot of programs run on Linux. So, very simply, Davinci Resolve wins the category here. Next is price, The full version of Resolve is only slightly cheaper than Final Cut Pro, and both programs are meant to come with lifetime updates. But where Final Cut Pro offers a 30-day free trial, Davinci Resolve has a free version with very few limitations, and you can get a lot of stuff done with just the basic free version. In fact, that's all I have right now. And you can't get much cheaper than free, but undeniably, Davinci Resolve wins the price category. Next up, we have reliability, and this one is quite close. Final Cut Pro has quite a good reputation for its reliability, and Blackmagic, it's not unreliable, but I have experienced more crashes with Davinci Resolve than I have with Final Cut Pro. I will say when I was using my Hackintosh, I did start to see the number of crashes increasing with Final Cut Pro, but I'm not sure if I can count that against it because Apple never intends you to use a Hackintosh and they are inherently an unreliable computer. So for that reason, I am going to give the point here to Final Cut Pro. Although, if you turn on the live save option in Davinci Resolve, I've never lost any data at all from a crash. I just open the program up again and everything is sitting right where I left it. Next, we're moving on to collaboration, and if it's just you doing the editing, this isn't particularly important, but if you're going to be working with a team, working with other people, maybe you want to run a production company, then collaboration is a pretty big deal. And Davinci Resolve has all sorts of features. You can compare different versions of timelines, multiple people can work on the same project at once, and there are plenty of options for having users sharing the files, sharing the projects, connecting to databases, servers, and network attached storage. Final Cut Pro, on the other hand, has a bit less of a collaboration feature set. If you put your Final Cut Pro library on a shared storage, providing you can actually find some shared storage that's going to work, it's a very specific type of network share you have to use. The extent of Final Cut Pro's collaboration is that only one person at once can have a library open. So I'm going to give the point here to Davinci Resolve. And for the final category, we're going to have ecosystem. So other programs that work well with the editor, or is there any particular hardware that works well? And this one is kind of close. I say kind of close because Apple makes Final Cut Pro and Apple makes a lot of computers, and that gives you some efficiency advantages because Apple can fine-tune their Macs to work well with Final Cut Pro. But especially in the last couple of years, we're seeing more collaboration between Apple and Blackmagic Design, so Blackmagic Design is pretty well optimized for Macs too. And Blackmagic makes all sorts of proprietary hardware, audio interface cards, video interfaces, recorders, color grading decks, audio decks, pretty much every type of accessory you can purchase for Davinci Resolve. And when it comes to other programs, Final Cut Pro does have good integration with Compressor and Motion 5, doesn't work quite so well with Logic, but still there is some integration there and it's not that bad. But Blackmagic, on the other hand, well, Resolve has all of the programs you need in one program. So you never need to open any other programs because you've got Fairlight for audio, you've got the color tools, you've got the editing tools, and one of the biggest updates for version 15 is Fusion. Fusion is a professional motion graphics program and it has way more functionality than Motion 5 does. And we haven't even taken into consideration that Blackmagic make their own cameras, professional cameras with RAW, and they work very well with Davinci Resolve. So I think for ecosystem, Davinci Resolve gets the point here. If I've added all of the categories up correctly, then Final Cut Pro should have 4 points and Davinci Resolve should have 6 points. But it's not as simple as saying just use Davinci Resolve. I think it really depends on what kind of thing you want to do. I appreciate that that's not a particularly helpful or definitive answer, so I'll try to give you a more definitive answer. First of all, if you're using Windows and you don't want to buy a Mac, well, we don't really have a decision here, use Davinci Resolve. If you're a YouTuber and you have no intention of becoming a professional Hollywood level editor, then I think Final Cut Pro has a lot of features and a lot of things that will interest you. The same goes if you're a solo freelance editor. If collaboration isn't such a big deal and you're not working on really high-end productions, Final Cut Pro could also be the way to go for you. Now, I'm not trying to say that Final Cut Pro isn't a professional editor. It absolutely is. It's been used on films, TV shows, high-end commercials. but I will say that Resolve is perhaps better suited to higher end professional productions. It has more features, it has better collaboration, and it has much better color tools. So if you want to be a professional video editor, if you're running your own production company or a post-production house, then I think Blackmagic Design DaVinci Resolve is the way to go for you. You could also consider using Premiere Pro, but I don't like Premiere Pro, so I'm not going to consider using it. If you found this video useful, please consider leaving a like, and if you don't want to miss any new videos, then please consider subscribing. Let me know what editor you use in the comments down below. See you later.